Welcome back to my channel on linguistics and language learning. In this video, I'm going to show you the general classification of morphemes. It means that whatever morphemes discussed in morphology, they belong to this general classification. Now, let's see the diagram of general classification of morphemes. And this is applicable to any language that you want to learn. Okay, in general, morphemes are divided into two. The first one is lexical morphemes, and the second one is grammatical morphemes. Both lexical and grammatical morphemes are composed of free morphemes and bound morphemes. So you can see that we have free morphemes and bound morphemes for lexical morphemes, and also we have free morphemes and bound morphemes for grammatical morphemes. Now the question is, what is the difference between lexical morphemes and grammatical morphemes? Lexical morphemes are morphemes which are used to enrich the number of vocabulary in a certain language. It means that when we are talking about lexical morphemes, we are talking about the possibility of expanding the number of words in a certain language. Meanwhile, grammatical morphemes have nothing to do with the enrichment of vocabulary in certain language. Grammatical morphemes are only used to fulfill the grammatical needs of a structure. It means that in this context is a word structure. So you can see here that in general, we have only two classifications of morphemes, lexical morphemes and grammatical morphemes. And these are applicable to all of types of morphemes. Now, let's see. We have free morphemes in lexical morphemes, and we have bound morphemes for lexical morphemes. Free morphemes that belong to lexical morphemes are also called root. And the class of words that belongs to lexical morphemes includes noun, and then verb, and then adjective, and the last one is adverb. So these four classes of words belong to free morphemes in the case of lexical morphemes, or in the category of lexical morphemes. Meanwhile, the bound morphemes that belong to lexical morphemes include derivational affixes. And you know, derivational affixes are used in the process of derivation. That is the process of building new words by changing the meaning of the words and or the class of the words. Okay, so these are free morphemes and bound morphemes for lexical morphemes. The next one is grammatical morphemes. The free morphemes that belong to grammatical morphemes are function words. And as you know, that function words have nothing to do with the enrichment of the number of vocabulary in a certain language. Function words include preposition, conjunction, pronoun, auxiliaries, and articles. So these are function words, and they are needed to fulfill the grammatical structure of a word. And the next one is in bound morphemes. For grammatical morphemes include inflectional affixes. So the affixes which are involved in the process of inflection, the process of building new words without changing the meaning of the words. Why? Because we create or we build new words in order only to fulfill the grammatical needs of a word. So these are the categories of morphemes or the general categories of morphemes which are applicable in any language. So if you want to study the classification of morphemes in a certain language, you can use this diagram in order to classify those morphemes. Now, let's see. Let's differentiate between free morphemes and bound morphemes. And as you know, that free morphemes are found in grammatical morphemes and also lexical morphemes. Now, free morphemes are meaningful by themselves. It means that free morphemes are meaningful by themselves. In other words, they have meaning when they stand alone, without being dependent to other morphemes. Okay, for example, cat, book, table, on, they. So you can see here that these are free morphemes. Cat has the meaning by itself without being dependent to another morpheme. Yeah, it has its own meaning. And also book, table, on, they, and other words. Now, bound morphemes are meaningless when they stand alone. You know, morphemes certainly have meaning, but for bound morphemes, their meanings can only be revealed after they are attached to other morphemes. Before they are attached to other morphemes, they have no consistent meaning. For example, you know, uh, suffix er, prefix re, and then suffix in, and suffix s. These are few examples of bound morphemes. And you know that these bound morphemes are both derivational and inflectional morphemes. And also this one, cat, book, table, on, they, these examples include both grammatical morphemes and lexical morphemes. Now, let's see the difference between free morphemes and bound morphemes based on the examples. So we can say that free morphemes are identical with words. I didn't say that free morphemes are similar with words, but they are identical with words. In other words, we can say that all of free morphemes must be words, but not all words must be free morphemes. And the next one, you can see here that bound morphemes are identical with affixes. If free morphemes are identical with words, bound morphemes are identical with affixes. So, all affixes must be bound morphemes. All affixes must be bound morphemes. But not all bound morphemes must be affixes. Why I said so? Because some bound morphemes are not affixes. For example, micro. You know, micro is not an affix. It has its own meaning, actually. Okay, it has its own meaning without being dependent to another morpheme. However, it cannot stand alone as a word. Therefore, micro also belongs to a bound morpheme. It doesn't belong to affixes, but it belongs to bound morphemes. You cannot use micro standing alone as a word. So it must be attached to another morpheme. For example, microscope, microlinguistics, and so on. And the next example is auto. Auto is also a bound morpheme, which is not an affix. Okay, auto has its meaning when it stands alone, but it cannot stand alone as a word or as a free morpheme. Okay, for example, you cannot say I read an auto, but you can say I read an autobiography. So autobiography, automobile, okay, autopilot, and some other morphemes or some other words. So we can conclude that free morphemes are identical with words. It means that Free morphemes must be words, but not all words are free morphemes. Bound morphemes are identical with affixes. What does it mean? It means that all of affixes must be bound morphemes, but not all bound morphemes are affixes. The next one is the classification of inflectional and derivational affixes. As I told you before, inflectional affixes do not change the meaning or the class of the word to which they are attached. It means that it doesn't change the meaning. So the question is, if it doesn't change the meaning, why do we need to build a new word? So building a new word in this context is needed in order to fulfill the grammatical needs of a word. For example, ing. Okay, when we have a sentence, for example, I am play, and you can see here that play in this context is grammatically incorrect. Therefore, in order to make it correct, we need ing. We need inflectional affix ing. Why? Because the verb is located after to be. Therefore, we have to build a new word that is playing. The second one is derivational affixes. So derivational affixes change the meaning and or the class of the word. Okay, this means that the thing that must be changed is meaning. Okay, so the meaning must be different. Okay, so the original word must have different meaning from the new words or from the newly created words. However, some of the words also experience changes in their class, but some of the words do not experience any changes in terms of their class. Therefore, I use here an or the class of the word. For example, let's say replay. Okay, so we have play is a verb, and then replay is also a verb. However, these two words have different meaning. Therefore, here belongs to a derivational affix. But when we use if here, for example, let's say act is a verb, okay? And then when I add here eva becomes active, this is no longer a verb, but this becomes an adjective. And of course, you know, the meaning of these two words are different. So derivational affixes change the meaning and or the class of the word to which they are attached. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all what I can explain to you about the general classification of morphemes that are applicable in any language in the world. And then see you in the next video.